All right. Mike,
Stu, nice
thank
to see you.
you too, brother. Thanks for taking the time to drive down. Means a lot.
My honor.
Yeah.
Honor.
So, we're here to talk about men's work and brotherhood and connection. And I'm curious, you've been to 6 retreats, and we'll talk lots about the retreats themselves, but I'm curious from your perspective, where were you at? What was your life like prior to us meeting and actually going into these retreats?
So prior to coming to my first men's retreat, my life was in a little bit of chaos. My wife and I were having some struggles. There was a lot of challenges going on in our marriage. And I actually ended up moving out of the house for about 8 months. This was probably about 6 months before that first retreat. I ended up moving back in. My wife and I, anytime we would even just say like, hello, good morning, it would always end up in about 20 seconds turning into a fight out of nowhere. So we didn't actually talk, we fought. And it wasn't a good place. Neither one of us were in a good place. Neither one of us were happy there. So there was definitely a lot of struggles in my personal life. Business wise, it was just moving forward. Not good, not bad, but it was moving forward. But being out where I was, I didn't have many close friends at that time. I had people I knew, but I definitely felt kind of like a lone wolf out there.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And anybody listening won't necessarily know who you are, but you have an extensive background in personal development and healing, and actually you support others in that.
Mhm.
And still, something was missing in that aspect around brotherhood and connection that you're referring to. What brought you to the retreats themselves and leaning in?
Having, as you say, I have extensive training. I've been working professionally in the sort of that holistic healthcare and spiritual realm for 24 years, taken a lot of classes. And any of the classes I took, I was usually the only male in the class. It was me and most likely the teacher was a male, and that's it. Working in this profession, I've always been surrounded by the feminine,
Mm.
lots of women, just that sort of feminine supportive energy. It has its place, doesn't always give me or give people what they need. And through that, also through my practice, I noticed most of my clients are female.
Mm.
And there was a real need for men to be supported in a way that isn't the loving, nurturing, feminine approach.
Right.
More here's the facts, here's what you're not paying attention to,
Mm.
here's what can help you shift your perspective and become better. The problem that I was experiencing though was because I was in that position of helping other people, I neglected myself.
Mm.
But I also came at it from a place, I had a little bit of a superiority complex.
Mm.
Because of all the training I had and
Right.
everything I knew, I thought I was fine and I was okay and that I'm here to help everyone else. So I was really not owning my own part in the struggles and challenges in my life.
Mm.
And I had met Riley, who you facilitate the retreats with, probably about a year before the first retreat. And I connected with him instantly and had a lot of respect for him. And when he shared that the two of you were going to be putting on this men's retreat, I was all in. I was all in. And I'm so happy I was.
Yeah, man. And before we go deeper into the retreats, I'm curious because you talked about women being more involved in the personal development space. This is something I've experienced. And even personally, for most of my life, I really only felt safe sharing with women. And that's actually dramatically shifted to me realizing that I can even be more raw and vulnerable with men in my life
Mhm.
with that without any attachments or any kind of other hidden agendas or conditions there. So that's been interesting, but I'm curious what your take is on why so many men are not leaning in to do that deeper emotional excavation, to do that personal development work.
I think this stems from just generational trauma. Even if we just look back 100 years or so, men had to be tough, they had to be strong. Even before all our modern amenities, work was hard.
Mm.
Farming, early industrial factory work. Think of all the wars that have happened.
Yeah.
So men had to put on this facade of being tough and strong and can handle anything. And in that process, it's been weeded, well, was weeded out of the masculine to know that it's okay to have emotion. Showing emotion is weak,
Right.
right? Tough it up, be strong, be a man. And as women are naturally more connected to the emotional side of things, and they just naturally fall into wanting to work through these things and understand things on that emotional level. And I think that's a big part of the reason why we start to see more, or we have seen more women in these roles or
Mhm.
in these events and courses and classes.
I think that's a really interesting insight, especially the industrialization, the wars. A lot of men, myself included, grew up with either physically absent fathers or emotionally absent if they were in the house.
Mhm.
And so we've lacked role models. And to your point, one thing I think is changing, and I hope comes across in the message that I share when I speak on these things as well, is linking the more I address my shame and the emotions that I'm not tending to, the things that I'm avoiding in my life, the greater my capacity is to lead in business, in my relationship, within my family, within my community. And I think that's a shift that men need to understand is when I address the things that I'm not willing to feel, I deepen my capacity to lead.
Correct. Correct. I've even seen that within myself.
Mm,
How I approach the classes I teach now, how I work with my clients, and how I interact with friends and family has definitely shifted a lot.
mm,
I held a lot of arrogance, and a lot of that I felt because of the amount of education I had and the amount of experience I had. There was a part of me that felt superior,
mm,
above everyone. And that arrogance was actually very harmful, not
mhm,
only to myself, but to also the people around me and the people I was serving.
mm.
And I'm really happy that I found an opportunity to humble myself and to be able to meet people on an equal level.
That's fascinating because I've actually seen that in real time at the retreats. And I remember at one of the retreats actually coming back and I felt almost like you were an entirely different person. Like the level of humility and the humanity that I felt through you was just right there.
Yep. Yep.
And well, and so I guess that leads us into talking about the retreats. Tell me about a little bit about your take on the retreats and the experiences.
The male friends I had in my life when I was younger, they were just surface level. They were because we shared common hobbies and common interests.
Me too.
Honestly, they were people that I could go out and do things with, you know. I'm a former addict. They were the people I could go out and have fun with and party with and ride bikes with, but there was never that deep connection. And when I moved here to New Brunswick 8 years ago, I met a fellow brother, Rod,
Mm,
and it was the moment I met him, I realized that I actually never had a real male connection in my life up to
mm,
that point. It was that instant connection with him and realizing what a real masculine friendship and connection can be.
mm,
Supportive. He was the first man I ever met where I could be unapologetically, authentically me
mm,
without judgment.
mm,
Because before, if I talked about who I really was or shared who I really was with my friends, they'd laugh right at. So I hid a lot of who I was just so I had people to hang out with. Like I said, people to smoke weed with and ride bikes with. And yes, I had good times and they were good people, but the authentic connection just wasn't there.
mm.
So coming to the men's retreat, that was part of what excited me because having that connection with Rod for a couple years to that point, and then meeting Riley and realizing, hey, there are more like-minded men out there who are actually wanting to see change and growth. So that was a real draw for me to come to that space. And as I said, there was a lot of arrogance in me too. So there was a part of me that also wanted to go there so I can help.
Mm.
I can be a part of the shift and the change and quickly humbled after two or three retreats. And it was good for me. And I've left every single retreat with 18 new brothers I know I can call upon
Mm,
anytime of any day, and they would drop what they are doing to be there to support. And I would do the same for
yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And I'm curious on that point around this shift and that one word as you're talking about what you came up against is confrontation. And at the retreats, we lean into healthy
them.
confrontation because we tend to dance around things and people please and have all these ways to avoid exposing our insecurities or our doubts. And at the retreat, we practice radical honesty and we create space for real conversation to happen. And I'm interested to hear how that kind of confrontation has shifted things for you in terms of that shift from the arrogance to how you're showing up and holding space in a
Mhm.
really transformative way now.
I think it was the third retreat where you first introduced charge clearing circle. And at that retreat, one of the brothers went through a pretty profound experience, release and opening. And just in talking with him in one of the evenings, I did what I used to do because I had a similar experience. So I shared my view and I put my experience on to him.
Mm,
And in doing so, I didn't realize it at the time because here I am, I stepped into therapist mode. And I just wanted to give him a heads up. These are some of the things that may happen
mhm,
after this experience you've had, but he never asked for it. And
mm,
here I am just telling you. And in the charge clearing circle, he actually called me into the circle and shared how it made him feel and how it impacted him. And it was in that moment that everything just kind of clicked. And I had to step back and realize it's not my place to impose my thoughts and my ideas if I'm not.
mm,
So from that moment on, I've learned to, may I share something with you?
mm,
Is it okay if I offer
mhm,
this? And have permission before I impose my thoughts or my ideas because it's very important. And I realize now that we need to give people an opportunity to say yes or no,
yeah,
because maybe they aren't in a place or maybe they just don't want to hear anything else.
right.
And that alone, actually, when I came back from that retreat, I ended up sending a big long email to that brother and just saying, telling him, like, I don't think you really understand what you calling me into that circle, the gift you actually gave me in that, and my ability to really see some of those toxic traits I had projected onto people for so long are just so humbled by his act of courage, first off, to call me in,
Mm,
because it's an intimidating thing to pull somebody into that circle and to express in that place of vulnerability. But also knowing that you're in a circle surrounded by brothers who are holding space and supporting and allowing that without judgment, without trying to fix it. To me, that was such a profound shift. And as you said earlier, it was the retreat after that where I was
yeah,
much more humble,
yeah.
much more centered, and much more willing to be of service just out of compassion
Mm.
as opposed to trying to fix things.
And honestly, it actually amplified your leadership. To me, from my perspective, you became more approachable, more influential in a way that it felt more relatable. And I love, you're using the words calling in at these retreats when we do confrontation, when we engage in these things. We don't call people out. We don't use shame as a motivator. I believe that the story that I hold about you is an invitation for you to step into. And so that's what we do. We practice calling in and say, hey, you say you want to show up like this, and there's a discrepancy here in your actions. And I just want to reveal this, and here's how it's impacting me. And there's an opportunity for realness, for actual connection. And we also don't fix, we don't give advice,
Correct.
we don't project our bullshit onto other people and think that we have anything to do to save that person. And practicing consent, like you said, in that way, that really gives power to the individual. Is this something that I want right now? Is this something that I'm open to? And then open the door. Like, that isn't something I realized either. How much I've in the past have steamrolled other people's experiences
Yeah.
by offering unsolicited advice or diminishing their experience, telling them it's going to be okay. They didn't ask for any of that. Just to be seen and heard is sometimes all the medicine that's required for
Correct.
change.
Correct.
Yeah.
At another one of the retreats when you first brought out the boxing glove. And to me, the theme of that retreat was really about anger,
Mm,
but how to utilize anger in a very strong and healthy, heart centered way. And that exercise was about being put into a position of conflict, but in a controlled,
mm,
safe manner.
mhm.
And if you remember, when I stepped into that ring, I was terrified. I was shaking. My whole
Your whole
body was
body was,
shaking.
yeah.
I couldn't speak properly. And when I stepped into the ring, I actually pulled Rod in. I felt safe and I felt comfortable because I had a close connection
Mhm,
with him. And I was still terrified, absolutely terrified. And then being thrown into that position and then moving through that opened me up to a different place of understanding conflict,
mm,
how to deal with situations. And yes, it was a very controlled experience at the retreat and a very safe space, but it was still throwing down with somebody. And throughout my life, if there has ever been conflict, I either ran away, just turned around and walked away, went silent,
mm,
avoided it. Or if I felt like I was really trapped, I became like a cat trapped in the corner.
mm,
Claws came out. And if I knew something about you that would hurt you, oh, I'd throw that in your face and then amplify it as much as I could
mm,
to tear you down so I could get away. And that hurts. It hurt me and it hurt a lot of people in my life who didn't deserve it.
mm,
And I will share a story that I've shared with you about how this conflict resolution actually came forward in my life. It was not too long ago. My wife was at a street festival in Sussex and she was talking with some gentleman. And when she turned around to walk away and leave, one of the guys reached out and grabbed her ass. I wasn't there. And as you know, that's not okay. It's just not okay. So she was scared to tell me.
mm,
But when she did tell me, of course, my first reaction is, I know where this guy works. I'm going to go show up there the next day and I'm going to deal with this, right? But that's not the appropriate way to approach this. Again, I respect people and their need and ability to make money. So I wasn't going to go and make a scene at his place of work. I have to respect people and their workplace. But I knew I needed to handle this. And it was about 5 weeks later, I told my wife, "Don't worry, I'll speak with him and I'll handle it." And about 5 weeks later, I'm outside the house doing some yard work and I see this gentleman walking down the street. Of course, I see him, I'm like, "Man, I just don't wanna deal with this today." I could feel the nerves coming up. I just wanted to turn around and run away.
mm,
And next time I see him, I'll deal with this. And they're like, "No, this has to be dealt with."
mm,
When he came close, he's a very chatty guy, so he always stops and talks. But he stopped and he tried to be chummy and friendly. And I just walked straight up to him. I was firm and I was assertive without being aggressive.
mhm,
And I told him, I don't want to ever hear you lay a hand on my wife or any other woman again. Inappropriate, it's disrespectful. You disrespected my wife, you disrespected me, and you disrespected yourself by doing that.
mm,
And again, stay cool and calm. And he tried to avoid it. He tried to deflect it. He actually went in and said, "Oh, yesterday I was stung in my neck by a wasp." I stopped him and I said, "I'm sorry that happened to you, but you're not escaping. Like, we're not done talking about this."
mhm,
I asked him, like, "Why did you grab my wife's ass?" Then he realized I knew what had happened. Then he became all apologetic and he apologized profusely. He shook my hand. It was done without needing to have physical conflict or me to yell and scream and get into his face. I was able to stay in that heart and deal with something that to me was very uncomfortable and very uncharacteristic of me. in a strong and healthy way.
Mm,
And when I told my wife that you don't have to worry about him, the situation has been handled and dealt with, the look of relief on her face. Because prior to that, I had never shown the ability and the strength to stand up for her. So it helped to strengthen our connection and to allow her to begin to open up to that trust in me again,
mhm,
to feel safe
mhm,
again. And 100% that has to do with the fact that I jumped in that circle of brothers twice at two separate retreats and threw fisticuffs with fellow brothers.
mm. Wow. I remember the first time you told me that experience and I had goosebumps and I do again right now. And I even remember you actually standing in the ring the second time and noted
I was
because
the
I've
first one to step in the second time.
right. And no shaking. Then I think it's important for men to understand there's a difference between anger and aggression. Aggression hurts. Aggression is intended to hurt and cut, where anger is there to restore a boundary,
Yeah.
but it doesn't need to hold a story. It can restore a boundary and deal with it. The story can drop. That is such a critical practice to be able to cultivate that sense of rootedness. And I think in this age where providing looks different, women can make money. So then what's a man's role here? And the structure and the safety that you provided by addressing an issue that your wife was uncomfortable with and bringing this in and say, you don't have to worry about this. It's
Yeah.
dealt with.
It also gave the other gentleman an opportunity to realize he did wrong.
Right.
And what normally probably would have ended up with him being knocked out by anyone else, he was given an opportunity to like, I fucked up.
Yeah.
And I'm being met by another man who is obviously upset by this, but not lashing out at me.
Mhm.
I know as soon as he actually took ownership of what he did, there was almost a look of relief on his face that
Wow.
the fifth didn't follow my word.
Wow. I think that's fascinating. What comes up for me there as I think about that, there's still a lot of contempt towards men. Some of it rightfully so.
Yep.
Men have been aggressors and have not been a safe space for women or communally. We've lacked a lot of leadership and, haven't had it modeled. That said, shame is not a way to drive behavior change. Continuously telling a man where he's not showing up or pointing out how messed up he is and expecting that to lead to a positive result is not going to be constructive.
Correct.
So, for that healthy confrontation and say, hey, here's this thing that's happened and how it's impacted my wife, myself, the broader community. It's not okay, but it's not shame driven. It's a direct confrontation and an opportunity for us to realize the impact that our actions have. That's profound. It's really a game changer rather than leveraging shame has been the modus operandi culturally to drive behavior change, whether it's cancel culture or shaming men or any of these kinds of things. It pushes our behaviors actually to the underground rather than giving it a place where we can love the parts of ourselves that we don't even love.
Correct. I had lots of those.
So, what's your take on the retreats? You've been supporting from the start and now even moving into deeper space holding and seeing so many men come through these things. What's the value from your perspective that a retreat or a brotherhood can actually offer a man?
A safe space to be real and authentic, and no matter what you're showing up with, and to be seen, to be heard, to be loved, to
Mm,
be supported in a way that we aren't stepping into that traditional masculine role of fixing things. We're there coming together as a group to hold space, to allow men to bring that vulnerability forward and to not be ashamed of it. Because as men, we've all fucked up.
mhm,
We've all made mistakes. We've all hurt people. We've all been hurt.
yeah.
I look back to my neighbor, the father figure of my next door neighbor growing up. His solution to anything was take a shot of whiskey and walk it off.
Mm,
Right. And yes, that was what he knew and how he knew how to handle the situations. But that's just shove it down and forget about it. That just perpetuates unhealthy behaviors and doesn't actually give an opportunity, especially as young boys, to learn, to grow. There's something so powerful about coming together with a group of men and seeing the vulnerability and to see these men break down into tears and no one's laughing at.
Mm,
No one's judging them. No one's calling them a pussy
mhm.
or telling them to suck it up. And to see other men shedding tears as men are sharing their story. Because you know what? I was kind of hesitant to share some of the things that were going on in me. And at the first retreat, it became so clear as every man shared what they were going through and their struggles and challenges. That's me.
Mhm.
I'm going through that. I've been through that. That is in my life right now. And that ability to connect with all those men on that level and understand I'm not alone.
Mm.
I think it was at the last retreat where you had us all stand in a circle and you would ask a question. And if it related to us, everyone stepped into that
Yeah.
circle. And one of the most profound questions that I think opened a lot of men's eyes was when you asked, have you ever thought about ending your life? Every single man stepped into the middle of that circle. And the look of surprise and awe
Mm.
and almost relief
Yeah.
on every man's face. And then you asked how many of you have actually tried it. And about half the men stepped into the circle again. It was just such a deep sense of connection. And again, feeling like we just weren't alone.
Yeah.
We weren't alone.
Yeah.
That is brotherhood. You say it all the time. Brotherhood is the medicine. And for men, 100% brotherhood is the medicine. Yes, you can get support from the women in your life, but it's not the same as that deep connection with men.
Mm. It was such a confronting moment to even see that and see the men step in, and we'd take a moment after to breathe into that, look in your another brother's eyes and
Yeah.
see yourself reflected back, and the tears that just started flowing through that experience. It is true that the quality and the texture of the support and the accountability and the raw feedback that we can get from a brother is different. And I think it's important. The women in our lives need men who can pinpoint what's alive in them actually going on, what emotions are moving through, and trust that the man is able to lead himself through that. They don't want to be his mother because that's not safe. And to expect that you should bring that into your relationship or dump that on all the women in your life, while that might feel comforting, it's not going to establish a sense of trust and safety and security that a woman needs to be able to open up and actually surrender, to actually
Yeah.
open.
The point you made about your partner not wanting to be your mother. My wife said that to me many times.
Mm.
My reaction was, is I've never asked you to be my mother.
Mhm.
I don't want you in that role. But because I was unable to sit in the uncomfortable with her
Yeah.
without feeling like it's projected at me, like I've done something wrong, like it's all my fault. That's why she felt like she had to mother. And through this process, being able to sit in that uncomfortable space with my wife now when she's processing and something's moving through her and realizing this actually isn't about me.
Mm.
And even if it's about me, it's okay. I'll sit in this uncomfortable space with her and allow her that opportunity to express what she's feeling. And through that, I've learned how to actually feel what she's feeling.
Mm.
Maybe it's because of something I said or did, or maybe it's because of some trauma that's coming up from her past. But by being able to sit in that space with her and actually truly empathize with what she's experiencing and understanding how and why my actions or inaction or anyone else's has truly impacted her.
Mm.
Been a game changer because before I would just react
Right.
rather than just sit.
Mm.
And I know I said it at one of the retreats because this was one of the early retreats where I was really struggling with how so many of my clients and people in my life put me on a pedestal.
Mhm.
I talked about it many times that weekend and kept saying, I hate it that people are putting me on this pedestal and making me feel like I'm better than everyone else. I remember at the end of that weekend when we did the closing circle, I think the only thing I said is, yes, people have put me on that pedestal, but it's only because I stepped up and put myself first.
I remember. Something that we discuss that I share often around space holding is having one foot rooted in my experience and my ability to regulate my nervous system, and one foot firmly rooted in empathizing with the other individual,
Mhm.
not getting defensive, not projecting my stuff, but being able to be there to validate the experience that that person's having and to stay rooted and regulated in my own nervous system. That is a practice. That is why we practice the confrontation. That is why we practice doing these things. And at the start of this conversation, you talked about experiencing quite a lot of challenges in your partnership prior to entering the retreats. How has that shifted and how is it shifting?
I remember also saying at one of the retreats that one of the things I was really struggling with was the fact that I had the capacity and the ability to hold space for everyone in my life, my clients, my friends. But the one person I couldn't hold space for was my wife, the one who truly mattered. I couldn't hold space for her.
Mhm.
And through leaning in and again being able to sit in the uncomfortable and not feel like it's an attack on me and
Mm.
my character over the last couple months, being able to actually have real conversation with my wife and to sit in the uncomfortableness of us actually finally talking about situations and struggles we've carried for 7 years. 7 years. I broke my wife's heart 5 days after we got married. And honestly, it's been a struggle and a challenge since we got married. We're now at a place where that bridge is built and we're meeting each other in a very supportive place. Yes, challenge still surfaces, emotions still come forward, but our ability to actually learn to communicate in a healthy way has changed so dramatically. One of the big things she always pointed out to me was watch your tone, don't yell at me. My frustration meant I just spoke a little louder and a little firmer. And that was a big trigger for
Mm.
her. And when I did that, she would begin to shut down.
Mm.
And when she shut down, I would either get more frustrated or I would shut down. And then as she dropped, I would drop. She would drop further, then I would drop, and nothing would be resolved. And now that I'm able to sit in the uncomfortable and actually work through these things with my wife, and again, not take it as a personal attack, the communication has improved, the level of intimacy and safety has improved. It's actually a blessing for us to really see a wonderful future for us moving
Mm.
forward.
It's been truly inspiring to witness the evolution, the ongoing depth that you're cultivating, the way that you're leading in your relationship, and putting aside your own wounds and your projections and your insecurities to actually understand what's alive in her
Mhm.
and to meet her where she's at is it's been nothing short of inspiring for me to be witness to.
And it's been such a powerful tool for me to also help my clients,
Mhm.
people that come to me for support. And because when I work with people, I'm honest and I'm vulnerable and I'm raw and I share my experience and what I've been through and how it relates to their struggles and their challenges. Sylvie and I are very open about what we've been through and the challenges we face or we are facing because as people begin to understand the depths of hurt and pain and struggle we've been through, and they're going through something similar, but they can also see that it is possible. There is an opportunity for change to happen
Mm.
if all parties involved are willing to step up to the plate.
Mm. That's a really good point. What I've observed is a lot of men wait until breaking point to actually do something about where they're at in their lives.
Yep.
I want to see more men take action and take initiative before they hit breaking point. What do you say to a man who, you and I are both stubborn? And it, I didn't realize multiple years ago that I even needed this kind of work until it was gracefully put on my plate, and then I leaned in and I've been taking it all in. But what do you say to the men who are stubborn, who have bought into the idea that if you're struggling, don't talk about it, and if you can't deal with all your problems on your own, there's something wrong with you or that you're broken? What do you have to say to the men who are worried about leaning in or not even considering leaning in because their life is good enough?
In my experience, especially when we look at relationships, by the time the man realizes that something needs to change, the woman has already decided it's over 6 months prior,
Mm,
and it's too late.
mm,
Too late to make that change. I have been divorced, and going through that process, I didn't take ownership for my contribution to the downfall of that marriage until she told me she wanted to end it.
mm,
Then, of course, what can I do? How can I help? I'm sorry. And that's a common theme for a lot of men, to tell men that it's okay to have emotion. Emotion means energy in motion. And the only way to release this tension, this hurt, this pain, this anger, whatever it is inside of us, is we actually have to feel it.
mm,
We have to experience that emotion, even if it's been trapped there since you were 4 years old.
mm,
It still needs to be felt so that energy can move out of the body. It's actually, in my view, a sign of weakness to hide it.
mm,
Real strength comes from vulnerability. Real strength in leadership comes from ownership. And that was the hardest lesson for myself to learn, was to own that I fuck up. I hurt people, and I hurt so many people in my life who just didn't deserve it. To the point that when I actually first met my wife, I think it was probably about a week after I met her, I actually told her, I'm going to hurt
mm,
you. I'm going to hurt you on a level that you've never felt before,
mm,
because that was my pattern. Anytime somebody let me in close and actually let their walls down, I walked all over them,
mm,
almost like push them deep into the ground with my heel. So there was a part of me that was scared, because this was the most magical, loving, caring, compassionate person I've ever met in my life. And I knew at some point I was going to break. And I did. But I also didn't take the steps to change so I didn't break.
mm,
At that point, I had owned, I will break.
mhm.
So be prepared.
Right.
And as I look back at it now, that was me giving myself an excuse for when I did break her. I told you it was going to happen.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't own it.
Yeah, you've been warned.
Yeah.
So now it's
You
on
chose,
you. You
you chose
chose
to
this.
stay. It's your fault.
Mm. So all the men sitting here saying, yeah, I feel my emotions a little bit. My relationships so so. Maybe there's something lacking fulfillment in my life. But I don't know. Like this whole gathering with men seems like a lot of bullshit. What do you say to that?
You get what you bring to it.
Mm,
And if you show up and if you want to be real, your life will change.
mm,
I've always loved watching those men, because we hear it every time. Everything inside of me just wanted to turn around and,
mm,
what the fuck am I doing going to this men's retreat?
mm,
What's this going to be about?
mhm,
Right. And there's a resistance. And you could see when they first sit down, that wall's up. They're guarded. And it's amazing how quickly those walls crumble.
yeah.
Crumble. The openness happens, and the shift and the lightness that happens because of that.
Mm. I agree. And as we were talking about before we even hit record here, I didn't realize I needed this.
Yeah.
My life, checked many boxes. I had good connections, things were good. And I didn't realize that I never really let people in.
Mhm.
I gave sprinkles of vulnerability, but I never shared the depth of how things were
Yep.
impacting me. And I never gave myself an opportunity to be truly seen in the way that I needed.
Me as well. Especially in my role as a therapist
Mm,
and a facilitator and running my own events, I was the leader.
mm,
I was the one who people looked up to for advice and direction. Why would I need that?
right.
Because I already know all the answers. I really realized how much I actually did need it. And that's also what these retreats have also provided me is an ability to show up at these events, still be able to hold space and help other men move through whatever it is they're going through, but to also let go of the responsibility of needing to be the one in control
Yeah.
and in charge and to actually just be present and participate and let go of the reins. It was definitely after the first retreat, I realized I can do that because you and Riley were able to hold such a strong, safe space that I didn't feel like I had to
Mm,
control things in the background and make sure things were done in a way I thought was
mm,
the best way to do
mm. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that reflection. And I know something that I'm still working through in my life is my ability to receive.
it.
I'll be limiting my ability to receive abundance in my life if I'm not allowing myself to receive.
Mhm.
And I know a lot of men struggle with this is we derive value from our ability to provide. And for me to be able to ask for help, for me to be open to receiving feedback, recognition, support in the places that I'm struggling is an ongoing challenge for me. And it directly confronts the self worth and my deservingness, the thought that I even deserve to be able to receive such support. And I'm learning to be able to open that up. I'm learning that I don't need to have it all together, that I'm flawed and fallible. And one thing I've realized is brotherhood for me has shortened the gap between the times I fall flat on my face and how quickly I can pick myself back up because I have men like you
Yeah.
who remind me of who I am and why I'm here and support me, whether that's going out and playing disc golf or giving me a starter kit of discs to go out and play and be supported, or the more deep things in my life where I'm struggling, or all the self doubt or the shame that I'm coming up against, and to put that out there and say, hey, yeah, let's carve out some time. I got time for you. Is still a thing that triggers my self worth. But every time I choose to lean into it, I'm creating a new story for myself.
It's amazing what the connection can do for us. Humbling, but
Mm,
also supportive.
yeah.
Again, I had to learn how to bring myself off that pedestal, but to also know that it's okay to receive the praise and
Mhm.
the support from my fellow brothers and people in my life. And that you're not doing it to put me on that pedestal. You're sharing your gratitude to me for my ability to support and hold space and not take it as an egotistical lift me up kind of thing and to be able to accept it in a very humble way.
Mm,
And it shifted everything in my life.
mm. I think that speaks to the reciprocity inherent in connection. And it's a tightrope because there'll be so many of us, different times, different parts of us, where we're trying to tell people how great we are and flaunting all of these things. And then on the other side, we diminish ourselves. And it's really this ability to find that middle ground where I can be of support, be of service, and also be recognized. I don't need to tell people how great I am, but I also don't need to diminish myself.
Correct.
that's that's a tough line, but being in community, being in brotherhood is a chance to practice reciprocity.
Rod actually long ago taught me a valuable lesson
Mm.
and that I would give him a compliment or point something out where he succeeded. And our usual reaction is like, oh, you as well.
Right.
Right. But what he did was, thank you.
Mm.
I'll own that. Right. He taught me that valuable lesson in actually receiving the input or the compliment or the support first.
Mm.
And then it doesn't always just need to be, oh, I think the same as you as well. Right.
Right.
Which was big.
That is massive. Is there any last things as we start to wrap that you'd like to touch on or riff?
Yeah. For any of the men out there who are struggling, who feel alone, who feel stuck, who feel like they can't do anything right, Brotherhood is the medicine. You will get the support and the love and everything you've ever been looking for in your life when you come together with other men who are on that journey. I've always said to myself, I'm an introvert. Don't like small talk. I don't connect with people. But in reality, as you find out here, I'm actually very extroverted when I'm in a place where it's real,
Mm.
meaningful conversation and where I feel safe enough where I can show up as myself, no matter what it is that day.
Mm.
If I'm sad that day, I can be sad and I can be met. If I'm angry that day, I can be angry to still be met. And the brotherhood has provided me that knowledge and that support that I never knew I needed until I had.
Mm. Amen. I think that's the perfect note to end on. I have nothing more to add to that. Mike, I appreciate you. I'm inspired by you. I'm honored to call you a brother and to be on this journey of growth and transformation. Thank you.
Thank you. And I look forward to see where this goes and how the community grows. You won't regret it.